I've loved them without expectation or agenda, simply because they needed to be loved. Elena's voice trembled as she stood in the kitchen, her hands gripping the counter behind her for support. Tears streamed down her face, but her eyes held nothing but fierce dignity as she faced the man who had just shattered her heart with a single question. Marcus stared at her, his throat tight, watching this woman who had brought life back into his home, now breaking apart in front of him. "Are you using my children to get close to me?" The words hung between them like poison. He had asked it, actually asked it, and now, watching her face, he knew with devastating certainty that he had just destroyed something precious. "I've sung them to sleep when they had nightmares." Elena's voice was barely above a whisper now. "I've held them when they cried for a mother who isn't coming back. I've celebrated their small victories and comforted their disappointments. For 8 months, Mr. Steele. 8 months I've given them everything I have." She removed her apron slowly, folding it with precise movements, and Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. "But I can't stay in a place where my care is seen as calculation." Her eyes met his directly, and the pain in them made him want to take back everything he had said. "I can't work for someone who looks at me and sees manipulation instead of devotion. So I am done." "Elena, wait, please." She held up her hand, stopping him. "I'll stay through the end of the week to help transition a replacement. After that, you'll never have to question my motives again." She walked past him, leaving him standing alone in the kitchen, the weight of his words settling like stones in his chest, crushing the air from his lungs. But to understand how a billionaire tech mogul could make such a catastrophic mistake, how he could wound the one person who had saved his family, we need to go back to a Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. Back to the moment when Marcus Steele walked into his penthouse and saw something that would crack open every wall he had built around his broken heart. If you've ever been so consumed by pain that you forgot how to live, if you've ever pushed away the very thing you needed most, then stay with me. This story will take you on a journey through grief, hope, fear, and ultimately the kind of love that heals what we thought was broken beyond repair. And if it resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be shared. No one expected Marcus Steele to return to the penthouse that Tuesday afternoon. For 8 months, the tech mogul had been practically living at his downtown office. He slept on the leather couch in his corner suite. He showered in the executive bathroom. He ordered takeout that he barely touched and worked through nights until exhaustion finally dragged him under. Anything to avoid going home. Home meant empty hallways that still smelled faintly of his wife's perfume. Home meant the bedroom they had shared, with her side of the closet still full of clothes she would never wear again. Home meant facing the reality that one morning, seemingly out of nowhere, the woman he had married had left a note on the kitchen counter that read, "I can't do this anymore," and disappeared from their lives completely. No phone calls, no explanations, no forwarding address, just gone. And home meant facing 3 pairs of eyes that looked so much like hers that it physically hurt to meet their gaze. Sophia, Samuel, and Sarah, his 4-year-old triplets, 3 small hearts beating in rooms too large, too quiet, too cold. Marcus told himself he was protecting them by staying away, that his presence would only remind them of what they had lost, that they were better off with professional care while he focused on rebuilding the company that had started crumbling the moment his personal life fell apart. But the truth he couldn't admit even to himself, was that he was terrified of loving them too much and losing them too. Terrified of opening his heart only to have it destroyed again. Terrified that if he let himself feel anything, the grief he had been outrunning for 8 months would finally catch up and swallow him whole. So he hired the best staff money could buy. Through an exclusive agency, he found housekeepers, nannies, cooks. He gave them explicit instructions. Feed the children, bathe them, keep them safe. Maintain structure and routine, nothing more. No attachment, no emotion, no love. Love only led to pain. He had learned that lesson too well. The staff followed his rules perfectly. They were professional, efficient, detached. The children were fed on schedule. Their clothes were always clean. Their rooms were immaculate. Everything ran like clockwork. But the penthouse felt like a mausoleum, beautiful, expensive, and utterly lifeless. The triplets stopped asking when Daddy was coming home. They stopped asking about Mommy altogether. They ate their meals in silence. They played quietly in their rooms. They became small, careful versions of themselves, as if they understood instinctively that big emotions were no longer welcome in this house. Then, 6 months ago, the agency sent Elena Rodriguez. She arrived with impeccable references and a calm, professional demeanor. Marcus met with her briefly, a video call between meetings where he barely looked up from his laptop. She seemed competent, reserved, perfect for what he needed. He had no idea that she was about to save his family. Elena had taken the job thinking it would be simple work. Good pay, prestigious address, straightforward duties. She had been a housekeeper for wealthy families before. She knew how to maintain boundaries, how to do her job without getting involved in the complicated emotional lives of her employers. But the first time she saw the triplets, something inside her chest cracked open. They were so small, so quiet, so heartbreakingly lonely. Sophia had greeted her politely, like a tiny adult. "Welcome, Miss Elena. Our rooms are upstairs. We're very tidy." Samuel had shaken her hand formally. "Thank you for coming to work here. We promise to follow the rules." Sarah hadn't said anything at all. She just watched Elena with enormous eyes that seemed far too sad for a 4-year-old. That night, Elena lay in her small room off the kitchen and cried. She knew that kind of loneliness. She had lived it herself years ago. After her parents died in a car accident when she was 17, she had raised her younger sister Catalina alone, the two of them navigating grief and loss together, clinging to each other because they were all each other had. Catalina had been 10 years younger, a surprise baby their parents had in their 40s. When they died, she became Elena's entire world. Elena worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat, to keep Catalina in good schools, to give her the childhood their parents would have wanted. For 12 years, they were everything to each other. Then, 3 years ago, a drunk driver ran a red light and killed Catalina instantly. She was 19. She had her whole life ahead of her, and Elena was alone again. She had told herself she would never get attached like that again, never let herself love someone so completely that losing them would destroy her. But watching these 3 children moving through their enormous home like little ghosts, she couldn't maintain that distance. The second week she was there, she broke the rules. She played music while cooking breakfast. Just softly at first, something with a gentle guitar melody. Sophia had appeared in the kitchen doorway. Curious, what is that sound? Music, sweetheart. Do you like it? Sophia had nodded slowly. Mommy used to play music. Elena's heart broke a little more. Would you like to help me make pancakes? One small act of warmth. One moment of connection. It seemed insignificant, but it was the beginning of everything. Over the following weeks, Elena slowly, carefully, brought life back into the penthouse. She sang while she worked. She asked the children questions about their days and actually listened to the answers. She sat with them during meals instead of serving and retreating. She discovered that Sarah loved dinosaurs and could name dozens of species, that Samuel was obsessed with astronauts and dreamed of going to space, that Sophia had memorized entire picture books and would recite them word for word if you asked. She learned that they cried sometimes at night calling for their mother, that they asked the previous staff where their father was, why he never came home if they had done something wrong. And Elena couldn't bear it, so she started telling them stories before bed, stories about brave children and loving parents, stories about families that got separated but found their way back to each other, stories that gave them hope without making promises she couldn't keep. She held them when they cried. She celebrated when they accomplished small things. She taught them games and songs and dances. She taught them that joy was still possible. And slowly, miraculously, they began to come back to life. Their laughter returned. Their smiles became real instead of polite. They started running instead of walking carefully. They started asking for things they wanted instead of quietly accepting whatever was given. They started being children again. Elena knew she was overstepping. She knew Marcus Steele had hired her to maintain distance, to keep everything professional and structured. She knew she was risking her job, but she couldn't watch these children fade away, not when she could do something about it, not when she had already failed to protect the person she loved most in the world. But maybe, just maybe, she could save these three. So on that Tuesday afternoon, when the triplets begged her to teach them how to dance, like in the movies they had been watching, Elena said yes. She put on music, real music, warm and rhythmic and filled with life. She took Sophia's small hands in hers and let the little girl stand on her feet as they waltzed clumsily around the living room. Samuel and Sarah tried to copy the steps nearby, bumping into each other and dissolving into giggles. Elena threw her head back and laughed, her hair escaping from its neat bun, her professional demeanor completely abandoned, in favor of pure, unguarded joy. It was the happiest she had felt since losing her sister, and the triplets were laughing like they hadn't laughed in almost a year. None of them heard the elevator doors open. None of them heard Marcus Steele step into the penthouse, briefcase in hand, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. He had come home on impulse. He needed files from his home office. It was the middle of the afternoon. He didn't expect anyone to notice his arrival, but when he stepped into the living room and saw the scene before him, he froze completely, his children, dancing, laughing, alive in a way he hadn't seen since before their mother left. And in the center of it all was Elena, her face glowing with genuine joy, moving with his daughter, encouraging his son and other daughter, completely present in a way that made his chest ache with something he couldn't name. This wasn't childcare, this was love. The music seemed to fade. Elena noticed him suddenly, and her eyes went wide. The children turned, following her gaze. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Samuel shouted, "Papa," and all three children ran toward him, not walking carefully, not approaching with hesitation, running with arms outstretched and faces bright with genuine excitement. When was the last time they had looked at him like that? Marcus knelt down instinctively, and they crashed into him, small bodies warm and alive and real. Sophia wrapped her arms around his neck. Samuel grabbed his hand. Sarah pressed her face against his shoulder, and something inside Marcus's carefully constructed walls began to crack. Over their heads, he saw Elena standing perfectly still, her hands clasped in front of her, fear flickering across her features. She looked like someone waiting for a verdict. "I apologize, Mr. Steele." Her voice was steady despite the panic in her eyes. "I know this isn't what you instructed. The children asked if we could have music time, and I should have checked with you first. I should have maintained better boundaries. I am sorry." Stop. His voice came out rougher than he intended, and Elena went silent. Marcus looked at his children, really looked at them, and saw what he had been too afraid to see for 8 months. They were smiling. Not polite, careful smiles, real ones. The kind that reached their eyes and made them look like the babies he remembered, before everything fell apart. "Papa, did you see?" Sophia pulled back to look at him, her small face earnest. "Elena taught us the waltz, like in the princess movies. Want to see?" Marcus couldn't speak. His throat had closed up completely. That night he lay awake in the bedroom. He hadn't slept in for months, staring at the ceiling. He kept replaying the scene, the music, the laughter, the joy. His children had been alive again, truly alive, and it had nothing to do with him. A stranger, a woman he had hired to keep things running efficiently, had given them what he couldn't. She had seen their pain and refused to ignore it. She had broken his rules because his rules were killing them. The questions came then, relentless and painful. Had he abandoned his own children? Had he been so consumed by his own grief that he left them to drown in theirs? Had he convinced himself that distance was protection when really it was just cowardice? And most devastating of all, had love been living in his own home while he hid in his office, too broken and too afraid to come back? By the time the sun rose, Marcus had made a decision. He called his assistant and cleared his schedule for the week. Then he asked Elena to meet him in his study. She entered exactly on time, her posture straight, her expression calm. but he could see the tension in her shoulders. She thought she was about to be fired. "Sit down, please." Elena sat, her hands folded in her lap, meeting his eyes directly. There was a quiet dignity about her that he hadn't noticed before, or perhaps he had never looked closely enough. "How long have you been doing this?" Marcus asked. "The music, the dancing, the closeness with my children." Elena didn't hesitate. "Since the second week I was here, Mr. Steele. I know it wasn't in the job description. I know you wanted minimal interaction, structured routines only. But children aren't robots. They need more than schedules and safety. They need love." Elena's expression softened. "Yes, why?" Marcus leaned forward. "This job pays well. I am sure the agency made that clear. You could have followed the rules, kept your distance, collected your salary. Why risk your position to get involved?" For the first time, Elena's composure wavered. She looked away toward the window, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of old grief. "I had a younger sister, Catalina. She was 10 years younger than me. When our parents died in a car accident, I raised her from the time she was 7. She was everything to me. My purpose, my joy, my reason for getting up every morning." Elena's hands tightened in her lap. 3 years ago, she was killed by a drunk driver. She was 19. She had just started college. She was going to be a teacher. She wanted to work with children who had lost their parents like we had. She was going to do something beautiful with her life. A tear slid down Elena's cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. "I never got to see her graduate, never got to see her fall in love, never got to watch her become the brilliant woman I knew she would be. And after she died, I told myself I would never get attached like that again. Never let myself love someone so completely that losing them would destroy me." She finally looked back at Marcus. "But then I came here, and I saw your children, so small, so quiet, so lonely, and I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't watch them grow up without joy, not when I could do something about it. Not when I had already failed to save the person I loved most." Her voice broke slightly. "So yes, I overstepped. I gave them music and games and stories and affection. I let myself care about them, even though I knew it was against your wishes. And if that costs me this position, then I accept that. But I won't apologize for loving them, Mr. Steele, because they desperately needed someone to." The silence that followed was profound. Marcus stood slowly and walked to the window, his back to Elena. When he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion he could no longer contain. "My wife left 8 months ago. No warning, no explanation beyond a note that said she couldn't do this anymore. One day she was here, the next she was gone. She didn't take the children. She didn't ask for custody. She just left them like they were part of the life she wanted to escape." He exhaled shackily. "I kept thinking she would come back, that maybe she just needed space, needed time, but she never did. And I didn't know how to tell Sophia, Samuel, and Sarah that their mother had chosen to leave them. So I didn't tell them anything. I just disappeared too, into work, into distance, into numbness. I thought I was protecting them from more pain, but really I was just protecting myself." He turned to face Elena, and his eyes were wet. "Yesterday was the first time I've seen my children truly happy in almost a year. And it wasn't because of anything I did. It was because of you, because you saw what they needed and gave it to them, even though it meant breaking the rules, even though it meant risking your job." Marcus moved back to his desk but didn't sit down. "I am not going to fire you, Elena. I am going to ask you to keep doing exactly what you are doing, and I am going to ask you to help me learn how to be their father again, because clearly I've forgotten." Elena's eyes widened with surprise. "I am staying home this week. I am going to be present. I am going to try to connect with them, and I have no idea how to do that anymore." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I don't know how to do this without it hurting." Elena stood slowly, and her expression had shifted to something gentler, something that looked almost like hope. "Then maybe it is time to learn, Mr. Steele," she said quietly. "Not for me. For them, they need their father. And yes, it is going to hurt sometimes. Love always does. But the alternative, staying numb and disconnected, that hurts them even more. She moved toward the door, then paused. Start small. Have breakfast with them. Ask them about their dreams. Listen when they tell you stories that don't make sense. Play their games, even when you don't understand the rules. Show up, even when it is uncomfortable. That is all love is really showing up. This is what real transformation looks like. Not perfect, not easy, but honest and raw and worth every uncomfortable moment. If this story is touching your heart, take a second to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me, have you ever had someone show you how to heal? Let's build a community of hope together. That conversation changed everything. Marcus cleared his entire schedule and stayed home. The first few days were awkward beyond words. He would emerge from his study to find Elena in the kitchen teaching the children to bake, their small hands covered in flour, their faces lit with concentration. He hovered at the edges, uncertain where he fit in this picture of domestic warmth. But Elena, with quiet patience, made space for him. Sophia wants to show you how to fold the batter, Mr. Steele, she would say, handing him a wooden spoon with an encouraging smile. Her technique is actually quite impressive. He would take the spoon with trembling hands and let his daughter guide him through the step, her small voice serious and proud. During story time, Elena would pause mid-sentence and turn to Samuel. Why don't you ask your father what he thinks happens next? This is his favorite part. Samuel would look at Marcus with hopeful eyes, and Marcus would struggle to find words that didn't catch in his throat. Elena never pushed, never demanded. But she opened doors he thought had been sealed forever, and she made it safe for him to step through them. Slowly, painfully, Marcus began to return to his children's lives. He started joining them for every meal. Breakfast became his favorite time, watching them chatter about their dreams from the night before, their wild imaginative stories spilling out between bites of pancakes. He learned that Sarah could name 47 different dinosaur species and could tell you which period each one lived in, that Samuel had built an entire space station out of blocks and cardboard and knew the names of every planet's moons, that Sophia had memorized 12 picture books, word for word, and would perform them like theatrical productions, if you asked. How had he not known these things about his own children? He started playing with them, actually getting down on the floor and building with blocks, roaring like dinosaurs, pretending to be an astronaut on a mission to Mars. It felt strange at first, uncomfortable, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. But then Sophia would laugh, really laugh, the sound bright and clear and full of joy. And Marcus would feel something in his chest unfurl, something that had been clenched tight for so long he had forgotten it was there. Elena watched from her position in the background, always present, but never intrusive, guiding him back to fatherhood with gentle redirection and patient understanding. One evening, after the children were asleep, Marcus found her in the kitchen preparing the next day's lunches. "Thank you," he said simply. Elena looked up, surprised. "For what? For saving my family, for giving my children what I couldn't, for not giving up on us even when I had given up on myself." Elena set down the sandwich she was making and looked at him directly. "You haven't given up, Mr. Steele. You are here now. That is what matters. Not that you stumbled, but that you are getting back up." For the first time since his wife left, Marcus began to feel like he could breathe again. Like maybe, just maybe, healing was actually possible. The penthouse began to change. Music played throughout the day. Laughter echoed through rooms that had been silent for too long. The children ran instead of walking carefully. They asked for things they wanted instead of quietly accepting whatever was given. And Marcus was part of it. Not perfect, not always comfortable, but present. For 2 months, life took on a rhythm that felt almost almost like a family again. Marcus worked from his home office, but emerged regularly to spend time with the children. Elena maintained the household, but had become something more than an employee. She was part of their daily life, woven into their routines and their healing. The children adored her. Marcus relied on her. And somewhere in the shared moments of parenting and partnership, something else began to grow, something neither of them acknowledged, but both of them felt: respect, gratitude, affection, the seeds of something deeper. And then, just as peace had finally settled into the penthouse, trouble arrived. Marcus's sister Victoria showed up unannounced on a Wednesday morning, accompanied by their mother Patricia. Both women were impeccably dressed, sharply observant, and immediately suspicious of everything they saw. "You are home," Victoria said, kissing Marcus's cheek while her eyes swept the penthouse with critical assessment. "In the middle of the week, how unexpected. Things have changed," Marcus said simply, evidently. Patricia added, her gaze landing on Elena, who was setting out coffee and pastries with professional efficiency. "And who is this?" "Elena Rodriguez, our housekeeper," Marcus introduced her. "Housekeeper," Victoria repeated, her tone loaded with implication. She watched as Sophia ran up to Elena, wrapping her small arms around Elena's legs. Elena bent down and whispered something that made the child giggle before sending her off to play. "She seems very close to the children," Patricia observed, her voice carefully neutral, but her eyes calculating. "She is wonderful with them," Marcus said, but doubt had already begun its insidious work, planting itself in his mind like a seed. Over the following week, Victoria and Patricia stayed in the guest suite, and their presence filled the penthouse with tension that hadn't existed before. They watched everything, they asked pointed questions, they whispered in corners, their eyes always tracking Elena's movements. "Darling, how much do you actually know about this woman?" Patricia asked Marcus one afternoon while the children napped. Her background, her history, her intentions, the agency vetted her thoroughly. Marcus replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "Agencies can be fooled," Victoria said, appearing in the doorway with her phone in hand. "People aren't always who they claim to be." That evening, after the children were in bed, Victoria and Patricia cornered Marcus in his study. "We need to talk to you about something serious." Victoria closed the door behind them, her expression grave. "What is it?" "It is about Elena." Patricia sat down across from him. "Marcus, sweetheart, we're concerned." "About what?" "About her influence over your children." Victoria pulled up her phone, showing Marcus a series of photos. "About the way she has positioned herself in your life." The photos were paparazzi-style shots, Marcus and Elena at the park with the children, at a children's museum, at a cafe having lunch. In every image, they looked like a family. "The press is already speculating." Victoria scrolled through tabloid headlines. "Tech mogul's new romance. Billionaire moves on with the help. Do you have any idea how this looks?" "We were just taking the children out," Marcus said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "There is nothing inappropriate happening, isn't there?" Patricia leaned forward. "Marcus, darling, you are a billionaire. You are vulnerable right now, emotionally compromised after what your wife did. This woman has access to your home, your children, your life. Don't you think it is convenient how indispensable she has made herself?" "She is not manipulating me," Marcus said, but the words sounded weak even to his own ears. "Are you sure?" Victoria sat on the edge of his desk, "because from where we're standing, it looks like a very calculated move. A housekeeper gets hired by a wealthy, emotionally devastated single father. She bonds with his children, makes herself irreplaceable, waits for him to develop feelings. It is a classic setup, Marcus." "You don't know her," he protested, but doubt was spreading through his mind like ink in water. "Don't we?" Patricia pulled out her own phone. "We did some research. Did you know she had significant debt 3 years ago? Did you know she has been sending money to someone in Arizona every month since she started working for you? Her sister's grave is in Arizona," Marcus said, grasping for explanations. "She probably pays for its maintenance. Or she has a partner she is supporting while she works on securing her place here." Victoria suggested coldly, "Marcus, we love you. We're trying to protect you. This woman saw an opportunity, and she took it. She is using your children to get close to you." The words hit him like physical blows that night. Marcus lay awake, his mind spinning with poisonous questions. Had he been naive? Had loneliness and gratitude blinded him to manipulation? Was Elena's warmth and care genuine, or was it all part of a long-term strategy? The doubt grew teeth and claws, tearing apart every beautiful moment from the past 2 months, reframing kindness as calculation, affection as agenda. By morning, he had convinced himself his family might be right. He found Elena in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared the children's lunches for the day. She looked up when he entered, and her smile was warm and genuine. "Good morning, Mr. Steele. Coffee's ready. I made that blend you like. We need to talk." His voice came out harder than he intended, and Elena's smile faded. She set down the sandwich she had been making. "All right." Marcus closed the kitchen door, and the click of it shutting sounded final, ominous. "My family has some concerns," he began, unable to meet her eyes, "about your role here, about how close you've become to my children." Elena went very still. "I see. They think," Marcus forced himself to continue, "they think you might be using the children to get close to me, that this has all been calculated." He finally looked at her, and what he saw in her face made his chest ache. Hurt, deep, profound hurt, but also something that looked like resignation, like she had been waiting for this moment all along. "And what do you think, Mr. Steele?" The question hung between them like a blade. "I think I need to know the truth," Marcus said, hating himself even as he spoke the words. "Are you here because you genuinely care about my children? Or because you saw an opportunity with a lonely, wealthy man?" The transformation in Elena's expression was devastating. The warmth drained from her face, replaced by something cold and wounded and infinitely sad. "Have you ever said something you immediately regretted? Something that broke something precious? Stay with me, because what happens next will remind you that some mistakes can be undone, but only if we have the courage to face them. If you are feeling this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it. That was the moment that brought us here. To Elena standing in this kitchen, tears streaming down her face, defending a love she had never asked for recognition of until it was questioned. If you have to ask that question, Mr. Steele, then I've already failed. Her voice was steady despite the tears, despite the pain radiating from every word. Because it means you don't see me at all. You see a role, a position, a potential threat, but not me. Not the person who has spent 8 months of her life devoted to your children's happiness. Not the woman who held them when they cried in the night. Not the one who celebrated every small victory and comforted every disappointment. She removed her apron slowly, folding it with deliberate care. "I've given everything I have to Sophia, Samuel, and Sarah. I've sung them to sleep when they had nightmares. I've held them when they cried for a mother who isn't coming back. I've loved them without expectation or agenda, simply because they needed to be loved." Elena's hands trembled as she placed the apron on the counter. "But I can't stay in a place where my care is seen as calculation. I can't work for someone who looks at me and sees manipulation instead of devotion. So I am done, Elena. Please wait." She held up her hand, stopping him. "I'll stay through the end of the week to help transition a replacement. After that, you'll never have to question my motives again." She walked past him, and Marcus caught the faint scent of vanilla and cinnamon that always clung to her from the kitchen. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and he was alone. The weight of what he had done settled over him like a physical thing, crushing the air from his lungs, making his hands shake. What had he done? The next morning, everything changed. Elena was professional but distant. She cared for the children with the same attention to detail, but the warmth was gone. She fed them, dressed them, supervised their activities with perfect efficiency. But she didn't dance with them, she didn't sing, she didn't laugh. The music stopped, and the children noticed immediately. "Where is Elena's smile?" Sophia asked Marcus that afternoon, her small face confused and worried. "Did we make her sad?" The question cracked something open in his chest. "No, sweetheart. This isn't your fault." But Sophia wasn't convinced. She approached Elena later that day, tugging gently on her sleeve. "Are you mad at us?" Elena knelt down, and for a moment her professional mask slipped. Her eyes filled with tears that she blinked away quickly. "Oh, honey, no, I could never be mad at you, never." "Then why don't you play with us anymore?" Elena's throat worked as she swallowed hard. "Sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult choices, but that has nothing to do with how much I love you. Nothing could ever change that." But she didn't elaborate, couldn't explain that their father had just shattered her heart, and she was barely holding herself together. Over the following days, the regression was painful to watch. Sophia stopped eating properly, pushing food around her plate with listless disinterest. Samuel started having nightmares again, waking up crying for his mother, for Elena, for anyone to make the hurt stop. Sarah withdrew into silence, spending hours staring out the window, her dinosaurs forgotten. They were fading again, right before Marcus's eyes, slipping back into the quiet, careful ghosts they had been before. Elena brought them back to life, and it was his fault. Marcus watched it happen with growing horror. He tried to comfort them, but they could sense that something fundamental had broken. The fragile piece they had built together was shattered, and they didn't understand why. He watched Elena maintain perfect professional boundaries, and he saw what it cost her. The way her hands trembled when she tucked the children in at night, the way she turned away quickly when they asked her to play, the way she slipped into her room each evening and didn't emerge until morning, and he could hear, if he listened carefully, the sound of quiet crying through the walls. He had done this to all of them. On Friday evening, Elena's last day, Marcus sat alone in his study after the children had finally cried themselves to sleep. He stared at his hands, at the empire he had built, at all the meaningless success that suddenly felt hollow and empty. What was the point of any of it if he destroyed the people who mattered most? Victoria and Patricia had left that morning, satisfied that they had protected him. But from what? From love, from healing, from the only person who had seen his broken family and refused to turn away. He thought about Elena's face when he had accused her, the hurt, the resignation, the quiet dignity of someone who had loved without expectation and been accused of manipulation for it. He thought about his children, who had bloomed under her care and were now wilting in her absence. He thought about himself, and how he had chosen fear over trust, suspicion over faith, the poisonous words of people who didn't live in this home over the evidence of his own eyes. And he realized, with devastating clarity, what he had to do, even if it was too late, even if she never forgave him. He had to try. Marcus waited until the penthouse was quiet, until he was sure the children were deeply asleep. Then he walked to Elena's room and knocked softly on the door. There was a long pause. Then her voice, carefully neutral. "Yes, Elena, please. I need to talk to you." The door opened. Elena stood there in simple pajamas, her hair down around her shoulders, her eyes red from crying. She had never looked more beautiful or more heartbroken. "There is nothing left to say, Mr. Steele." "There is everything to say." Marcus's voice cracked. "And I am asking, begging for you to hear me." Elena's jaw tightened, but she didn't close the door. "I was wrong," Marcus started, and once the words began they poured out like a flood. "Not just about questioning you, but about everything. I was so afraid of being hurt again, of trusting someone who might leave, that I sabotaged the best thing that has happened to this family in years." He took a step closer, his carefully constructed walls crumbling to dust. "You weren't using my children to get to me. You were using your heart to save them. You saw 3 lonely, broken kids, and you refused to let them stay that way, even though it meant risking everything, even though it meant breaking the rules, even though it meant opening yourself up to loss again after you had already lost so much." Tears started falling down Marcus's face, and he didn't wipe them away. "I was drowning, Elena. I was so lost in grief and anger and fear that I forgot how to live. I forgot how to be a father. I forgot that love was worth the risk of pain. But you reminded me. You showed me what it looks like to show up, to be present, to love without protection or reservation or guarantee." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, showing her a video. It was from the home security system, from that first Tuesday afternoon when he had walked in and found them dancing. "I've watched this 100 times this week," he said quietly, "and every time I see the same thing. I see my children alive, really alive, and I see you giving them everything you have, expecting nothing in return. That is not manipulation, Elena. That is the purest love I've ever witnessed." Marcus met her eyes directly. "I don't need a perfect employee. I don't need someone who maintains distance and follows rules, and keeps everything sterile and safe. I need someone who will dance with my children in the middle of the afternoon. Someone who will teach them that joy is possible, even after loss. Someone who will look at a broken man and see someone worth pulling back into the light. His voice dropped to a whisper. I need you, Elena, not as a housekeeper, not as an employee, but as family, as someone who belongs here, with us, if you'll still have us after everything I said, after I questioned the most genuine thing in my life, because I was too scared and too damaged to recognize it. Elena's hand came up to cover her mouth, a sob escaping, despite her attempt to hold it back. I can't promise I won't be scared sometimes, Marcus admitted. I can't promise I won't struggle with trust, because I am still learning how to do this. But I can promise that I see you now, really see you. And what I see is the most extraordinary person I've ever known. Someone who loves without agenda, who gives without expecting return, who stayed when everything in her probably told her to run. He held out his hand, trembling. Please don't go. Please give us another chance to do this right. Let me prove that I can be worthy of what you've given us. For a long moment, Elena just stood there, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking with the force of emotion she had been holding back all week. Then, slowly, she placed her hand in his. I am scared too, she whispered. I am scared of caring this much again. I am scared of losing more people I love. Every time I let myself love someone, they leave, my parents, my sister. And I thought maybe if I just did my job and kept my heart safe, I could avoid that pain. She looked up at him, her dark eyes luminous with tears. But then your children looked at me with so much need, and I couldn't help myself. I fell in love with them, and somewhere along the way I started falling for you too, for the man you were trying to become, for the father who showed up even when it was uncomfortable, for the person who was brave enough to learn how to love again. Marcus pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against him, both of them holding on like survivors of a shipwreck finally reaching shore. I am sorry, he murmured into her hair, over and over. I am so sorry. They stood there for a long time, crying together, healing together. Two broken people, finding wholeness in each other's brokenness. We'll figure it out together, Marcus finally said, all of us, as a family. Elena pulled back just enough to look at him. As a family, if you'll have us. Marcus smiled through his tears. If you'll stay, not as an employee, but as part of this family. We need you. Elena, I need you. She kissed him then, soft and tentative and full of hope, and it felt like coming home. The next morning the penthouse woke to the sound of music again. Marcus emerged from his room to find Elena in the kitchen, dancing with all three children while making pancakes. She looked up when she saw him, and the smile that spread across her face was brilliant, unguarded, full of joy and possibility. Papa, Sarah called out, running to him, come dance with us. Elena's back is she. Marcus grinned, catching Sarah up in his arms and spinning her around. For how long? Forever, Sophia announced confidently. Right, Elena. Elena met Marcus's eyes over the children's heads, and the love in her gaze made his breath catch. Forever sounds about right, she agreed, and for the first time Marcus didn't hesitate. He joined them, stumbling through steps he didn't know, laughing at his own clumsiness, letting joy replace the fear that had ruled him for so long. The transformation over the following months was profound. Marcus restructured his entire work life to be present for his children. He attended every meal. He read bedtime stories. He played dinosaurs and astronauts and princesses. He showed up day after day, even when it was hard. Elena stayed, not as hired help, but as integral family. She and Marcus navigated the complications together. His family eventually came around when they saw the genuine happiness radiating from the children. The press speculation faded when it became clear that whatever was developing between Marcus and Elena was built on a foundation far deeper than scandal. There were hard days too, moments when grief returned unexpectedly, when old fears resurfaced. when the process of blending their hearts and lives felt overwhelming, but they faced those days together with honesty and patience, and the growing trust that they would weather whatever came. On an evening, nearly a year after that first Tuesday afternoon, when Marcus walked in to find his children dancing, he and Elena sat on the penthouse balcony after the triplets were asleep. The city glittered below them, full of light and life and possibility. "I've been thinking," Marcus said, reaching for Elena's hand. "About what?" "About making this official." Elena looked at him, her expression curious, a small smile playing at her lips. "I want to add you as the children's legal guardian," Marcus explained. "Not because I am planning to go anywhere, but because you already are their guardian in every way that matters. You are their mother in all the ways that count. If anything ever happened to me, I need to know they'd be with someone who loves them as much as I do." Elena's eyes filled with tears, the good kind this time. "Marcus, I would be honored and—" he continued, his voice soft but certain, turning to face her fully. "When you are ready, no pressure, no timeline, I'd like to ask you to be my wife." He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "I am not asking you because it is convenient or expected. I am asking because somewhere between the dancing and the dinosaurs and the late-night conversations and learning how to be a father again, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you. You are not a phase or a rebound or a way to fill empty spaces. You are the person I want to build a life with. You are home." Elena laughed through her tears, a sound of pure joy and disbelief and overwhelming love. "Yes," she said, not even hesitating. "Yes, I'll marry you. I'll be their mother. I'll be your wife. I'll be part of this beautiful, broken, healing family." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, and in that moment everything aligned. Past pain and present healing and future hope, all woven together into something stronger than any of them could have created alone. 6 months later, in a quiet ceremony with only the children and a handful of close friends present, Elena Rodriguez became Elena Steele. Not the housekeeper who had been caught dancing with the boss's children, not the employee who had overstepped her bounds, not the woman who had been accused of manipulation, but the woman who had seen a broken family and loved them back to wholeness. The woman who had taught a grieving man how to be a father again. The woman who had proven that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin not with grand gestures or fairy tale meetings, but with small acts of courage. The courage to dance in the middle of the afternoon, the courage to love without guarantee, the courage to believe that broken things can be made beautiful again. The penthouse that had once echoed with loneliness now rang with laughter every single day. The man who had hidden from life now met each morning with gratitude and open hands. The children who had been quietly fading now blazed with joy and security, and the unshakable knowledge that they were deeply, unconditionally loved. And at the center of it all was Elena, no longer just the maid, but the heart that had brought them all home. Because sometimes the people who come into our lives in the most ordinary ways end up changing everything in the most extraordinary ways. Sometimes what looks like a scandal from the outside is actually a miracle happening in real time. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves be loved by someone who sees past our walls to the tender, wounded hearts beneath. Marcus had thought he was hiring someone to care for his children while he hid from his pain. Instead, he had found someone who would teach him that love, real transformative love, doesn't come with job descriptions or protective boundaries or carefully managed expectations. It comes with music and mess and vulnerability and risk. It comes with showing up day after day, even when it is hard, even when it hurts, even when you are terrified. It comes with choosing to trust, to hope, to believe that this time might be different. And in their case it was. The maid who had been caught dancing with his children didn't just care for them. She transformed them all. She healed what they thought was broken beyond repair. She proved that families aren't always born. Sometimes they're built by people brave enough to love without reservation. And the billionaire who walked in expecting to find a boundary violation discovered Instead, the beginning of everything he thought he had lost forever. Family, connection, laughter, purpose, love, and finally, after so much darkness, peace. In the end, nothing was what it seemed. It was so much more. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that healing is possible, that broken families can be made whole, that love can walk through our door in the most unexpected ways, then I need you to do something. Hit that like button right now. Subscribe so you never miss stories that feed your soul and remind you why hope is worth fighting for. And most importantly, drop a comment below. What is one thing this story taught you about second chances, about the courage it takes to love after loss, about the power of showing up? Share this with someone who needs hope today, someone who is struggling to believe that their broken pieces can be put back together, someone who needs to be reminded that the people who save us often arrive in the most ordinary disguises, because stories like Marcus and Elena's, they remind us that our darkest moments can become our greatest transformations, that the courage to be vulnerable is the courage that changes everything, that love, real love, isn't about perfection, it is about presence. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting this story into your heart. I'll see you in the next one.